Hi, my name's Rebecca. Welcome back to my channel. Let's talk about all the backlist books that I want to read in 2024. So first up we have Alone with You in the Ether by Olivia Blake. This book came out in 2020 and it's been on my radar for the last couple of years, but I've heard some really glowing reviews in the last few months about this book, and it'll be my first Olivia Blake, I think, so I'm excited to dive in. I do know this is a story about two people who are dealing with deeply difficult mental health disorders, something that I personally also struggle with, so I'm interested to see how that's written out. This is a love story, but it's not a romance, and I've heard that Olivia Blake's writing is poetic, but not like overly drawn out, which is some of my favorite kind of writing, so I'm excited to dive in and meet these characters. Also really love that this book is only like 280 pages. Long live the short book. I love that. Okay, next going in a completely different direction. I don't know that I would call this a love story, but it's definitely a romance. It's Butcher and Blackbird by Brynne Weaver. This book took Bookstagram and Book Talk by storm this year. It's a book that I've had on my radar. I actually have had it checked out on my Kindle Unlimited subscription for a while, but I just haven't picked it up yet, and I don't know why, if I'm being really honest, because it's very much my shit. Like, I don't know why I haven't picked it up yet. So they are both serial killers, and they turn kind of into rivals when Rowan happens upon Sloane, who has just taken care of a target that they both had, but somehow she gets like stuck in a cage or something during that, so he rescues her. And then they just build this unlikely friendship that turns into more, and they're kind of playing this game of, you know, who can get through the targets first and fastest and all that good stuff. I say good stuff because murdering people is not good, obviously. But the vibe of this is very like if Dexter met another Dexter and fell in love. Because it's definitely more of that. What's the word for that? Like vigilante justice, I think. And the second book comes out later this year. They're interconnected standalones the way most romances are, but I don't believe that the second story is contingent upon the first. But I am interested to know. I really enjoyed dark romance. I read a lot of mafia romances this year, and so I enjoy a different take on dark romance, so I'd like to check that out. And then next we have a book that I have picked up and started like 4 times, and it's not the book, it's just me. Each time I go, this isn't the right time for this, and I put it down, I'm hoping that 2024 will be the right time for it, and that is The Undertaking of Heart and Mercy by Meg Bannon. Hart is a marshal who's tasked with patrolling the strange and magical wilds of Tanria. It's an unforgiving job, and Hart's nothing but time to ponder his loneliness. And then Mercy never has a moment to herself. Unfortunately, she becomes responsible for Birdsall and Sons Undertakers, which is her family's company. Her dad, I think he injures himself, because I read like the first like 30 pages, and like he's not supposed to lift anything, he's not supposed to be helping. And then her brother, who was supposed to come back from school and help take over, doesn't for some reason. And so Mercy's kind of stuck. And then there's like this magical like writing system there, because Hart writes a letter addressed simply to a friend, and it makes its way to Mercy, and that's kind of how their friendship is born. And if you know anything about me, you know I love epistolary in romance novels. I absolutely love it. It's my favorite. And there's nothing better to me than people getting to know each other over letters or emails or texts, in addition to the other things we have going on in the story. There's something about those methods that tend to bring out a vulnerability in people that you don't often see, especially when you're just getting to know them. So I really enjoy that, and I'm looking forward to it. Okay, next we have a book that I actually physically have on my shelf. That's The Collective by Allison Galen. This is a thriller that was a Book of the Month pick, I want to say in 2021. And it follows Camilla, who's a grieving mother 5 years after her daughter's death, and she's still obsessed with the privileged young man she believes to be responsible. And it says when her rash actions draws the attention of a secret group of women, the Collective, Camille is drawn into the dark web, where these mothers share their wildly different stories of loss as well as their desire for justice in a world where privilege denies accountability and perpetrators emerge unscathed. Yeah, I enjoy a vigilante justice book. I don't know if that's exactly what this is, but I think it was Gabby from Gabby Reads read this recently, and she was talking about how when she first looked at it, she's like, I don't know if, like, I'm going to enjoy this. And then she was, like, raving about it by the end. And that's kind of the same thing I've seen. I've seen a lot of, like, midline reviews, like 3.5 stars. But something about this book, like, it just keeps coming back and it keeps coming up and it's on my shelf. And I'm trying to read from my shelves a lot this year. And next we have another thriller by Gillian McAllister, and it's Wrong Place, Wrong Time. This is another book that I've started to see crop up a lot. This is a book where a mother, I don't know if she witnessed her son killing somebody or finds out about it, but it kind of turns into like a Groundhog's Day thing where she is trying to figure out, like, why would my son do this? How did we even get here? And she also is kind of using this as a way, I think, to spend some more time with him and to pick up on some clues, because she didn't know that she needed that before, that she needed to really concentrate some time on her son, like, more so than usual. So I don't feel like I did a great job of explaining this book, but I feel like it's one of those books where, like, if you read too much into the synopsis or reviews, you're going to get spoiled, and so I've avoided a lot of that, just to avoid missing out on what's going to come. I also really want to dive into some more horrors this year. I've started to lightly experiment with it, especially more like societal horrors. And I added When the Reckoning Comes by LaTanya McQueen to my list of books to check out this year. It says it's a haunting novel about a black woman who returns to her hometown for a plantation wedding and the horror that ensues as she reconnects with the blood-soaked history of the land and the best friends she left behind. And that was all I needed to know about that. Another one where I have not looked at very much of it because I don't want to be spoiled. Alright, shifting into romance, 7 Days in June by Tia Williams. I don't know how I haven't read this yet. In fact, Tia Williams has another book coming out this year called A Love Song for Ricky Wilde, and I think the publisher actually sent me a widget for it on NetGalley, and I accepted it, and then I looked and was like, oh, this is from the same author as 7 Days in June. I should read. I had this thing about wanting to read their first books first, even if they're, like, not interconnected. But I've just heard such good things about this. It's a 7 days to fall in love, 15 years to forget, and 7 days to get it back, all back again. Ava Mercy's a single mom and best-selling erotica writer who is feeling pressed from all sides. Shane Hall is a reclusive, enigmatic, award-winning literary author who, to everyone's surprise, shows up in New York. When Shane and Ava meet unexpectedly at a literary event, sparks fly, raising not only their past buried traumas, but the eyebrows of New York's black literati. What no one knows is that 20 years earlier, teenage Ava and Shane spent one crazy torrid week madly in love. They may be pretending that everything is fine now, but they can't deny their chemistry or the fact that they've been secretly writing to each other in their books ever since. Ah, that's so romantic. So over the next 7 days in the middle of a steamy Brooklyn summer, Ava and Shane reconnect, but Ava's not sure how she can trust a man who broke her heart, and she needs to get him out of New York so that her life can return to normal. Before Shane disappears again, there are a few questions she needs answered. I struggle with books like this where the premise is they were together as teenagers for a short period of time, lots of time has passed, and then they get together again. But I have heard nothing but good reviews of this book, so maybe it is one of the few books that does that right, and I'm hopeful that it will be. And now we're going to shift gears dramatically. This book has been on my TBR for maybe like 9 years. And that's so wild to say. That book is The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin. I am so intimidated by her work. She's a Hugo Award winner, which is a award given to the best science fiction and or fantasy book every year. And she's won that award so many times. And I've heard that this book is one of those ones where you go into it and you have no idea what the fuck is going on, but you just want to keep going. And I think there's 3 in the series. It says, at the end of the world, a woman must hide her secret power and find her kidnapped daughter. This is the way the world ends, for the last time. It starts with the great rift across the heart of the world's sole continent, spewing ash that blots out the sun. It starts with the death with a murdered son and a missing daughter. It starts with betrayal and long dormant wounds rising up to fester. This is the Stillness, a land long familiar with catastrophe, where the power of the earth is wielded as a weapon and where there is no mercy. Wait, don't you just want to read that? Doesn't that sound like a chaotic good time? I think what actually got me to want to read this was watching the show Silo on Apple TV+. I did not know that was a book series until I was done with season 1, and I debated picking that up. But when I was going back through this list and looking at books that were on my shelves and things I really wanted to get to this year, reading that synopsis kind of, something about it reminded me of that. Not so much about the family plot, but just the, post-apocalyptic, everything is tenuous, and like trying to survive. Just, I don't know, something about that got to me. And I really enjoyed that experience with Silo, so I'm hoping that will translate over and maybe help me understand more, because that's sometimes I find science fiction incredibly intimidating, like trying to understand the science behind it, because there's so many books where it's contingent on you understanding the science behind it, when I sometimes just don't. So fingers crossed that goes well. Another book that's been on my list for a while, this one not quite as long because it was published in 2020, but has been on my list literally since the initial marketing was happening for this book in late 2019. It's My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell. I've heard nothing but good things about this book, but also that it is just so tragic. And I enjoy a tragic thing. I intentionally read A Little Life. I will probably reread it this year. I've been putting off a reread, but I want to. I read The Great Believers by Rebecca Makkai, so I am not a stranger to tragedy. This book explores the psychological dynamics of a relationship between a precocious yet naive teenage girl and her magnetic and manipulative teacher, a brilliant, all-consuming read that marks the explosive debut of an extraordinary new writer. So in 2000, Vanessa was 15, had an affair with, she was 15, so yeah, with Jacob Strain, who was her teacher, who was 42 at the time. And then in 2017, a bunch of allegations come up against him, and he's accused of sexual abuse by a former student, who then reaches out to Vanessa, and now Vanessa suddenly finds herself in this impossible decision of, like, do I remain silent? And she says, firm in the belief that her teenage self willingly engaged in this relationship, or does she redefine herself and the events of her past? It says, but how can Vanessa reject her first love, the man who fundamentally transformed her, and has been a persistent presence in her life? Is it possible that the man she loved as a teenager and who professed to worship only her may be far different from what she always believed? Yeah, I've heard this is a really tough one. Like, obviously there's grooming there. Obviously there is intercourse with a minor and things like that. So it's definitely going to be a heavy hitting one. But I don't know that I've ever seen a book like this where it's been from the victim's point of view and that victim felt so strongly that, like, so much of it was their choice. So I'm interested to see how that all plays out and if it stands up to all the glorious reviews that it's had. All right, had to do a quick battery change. Also, this silver creeping up is my laptop. Working off this list here. Alrighty, next is a book that I didn't read because the hype was just too big and I needed it to die down for a little bit and separate myself from it so that I could come into it hopefully unbiased, or as unbiased as possible after you live through a hype train. And that book is Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. I've never read anything by Gabrielle Zevin, which feels like a sin in itself. But Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow is about Sam, who exits a subway car and sees Sadie Green. He calls her name, and for a moment she pretends she hasn't heard him. But then she turns and a game begins, a legendary collaboration that will launch them to stardom. They borrow money, beg favors, and before even graduating college, they have created their first blockbuster, Ichigo, a game where players can escape the confines of a body and the betrayals of a heart, and where death means nothing more than a chance to restart and play again. It is this story of the perfect world Sam and Sadie build, the imperfect world they live in, and the end of everything that comes after success. Money, fame, duplicity, and tragedy. It says it spans 30 years, and from Cambridge, Massachusetts to Venice Beach, California, and lands in between and far beyond. I love a story that spans time like that. Generally speaking, I would not be down to read a book about video games. Just wouldn't. I like playing them sometimes, but not a subject matter that I really care about when it comes to books. But I know it's about so much more than that, and I'm not sure when I'll read that. That's a book you can really read at any time. But I do know I'm going to participate in a few readathons in the beginning of the year, so I'm hoping maybe it'll fit one of those prompts so that I can maybe start the year off with a bang. Okay, one of the things that I really want to do is read more award-nominated books. So I chose Pod by Laline Paul. This book, I think, is meant to be weird. It's short, 288 pages, and it follows two estranged dolphin tribes. They live at opposite ends of a remote tropical archipelago. At one end, where the water is cleaner, there's a tiny pod of spinner dolphins, spiritually refined and matriarchal. At the other is a vacuous megapod of bottlenose dolphins, who once drove the gentle spinners from their home, but now live in increasingly painful acoustic conditions, which they believed are caused by warring ocean demons. Circling the archipelago is a lone humpback whale who sings, warning to his people about the new perils of the old routes. And caught between the sanctuary of family and the vast unknown is a young spinner dolphin about to make the ultimate sacrifice. The ocean is changing beyond recognition, and every forced migration for survival spells new conflict. In this epic propulsive novel, Laline Paul explores the meaning of belonging, sanctuary, and courage in a metamorphosizing undersea world increasingly haunted by the cruelty and ignorance of the human race. I don't know that I've ever read a book that's entirely from the point of view of an animal, mammal, amphibian, anything. So I'm excited to read this. As I said, it's 288 pages, so I'm hoping that I can just pick a slow, Sunday, pick this up in the morning with a cup of coffee and read through the afternoon and just see where it takes me, because, I don't know, something about that sounds really exciting. And in a similar vein of stories that I haven't often read about, I want to read Down Among the Sticks and Bones by Shauna McGuire, and that's the second book in the Wayward Children series. I picked up the first one, I don't know if I picked up last year or the year before, and I really enjoyed it. And then my library had the rest of the books on crazy 16, 18-week holds, and I was like, man, I'll just come across the series later. But I really enjoyed that first book. These are portal fantasies, and each book follows a different, I think, child or sibling group. They're at the school for wayward children. These kids have found their way through doors or portals to worlds where they truly belong. Often seen as super odd in our world, but they go there, they find themselves there. Sometimes it's really challenging, sometimes it's really euphoric, and then they come back and they don't know how to deal, because you, I think, technically can't go back through your door again, or if you do, you can't come back. I'm not entirely sure what the rules are there. I just know it's very difficult for them to travel through their doors again. So a lot of them will get sent to this school where they're cared for and they can be with other kids who understand that struggle. But this one follows twin sisters Jack and Jill, who were 17 when they found their way home and were packed off to Eleanor West's home for wayward children. This is the story of what happened first. It says Jacqueline was her mother's perfect daughter, polite and quiet, always dressed as a princess. If her mother was sometimes a little strict, it's because crafting the perfect daughter takes discipline. Jillian was her father's perfect daughter. Adventurous, thrill-seeking, and a bit of a tomboy, he really would have preferred a son, but you work with what you got. They were 5 when they learned that grown-ups can't be trusted. They were 12 when they walked down the impossible staircase and discovered that the pretense of love can never be enough to prepare you for a life filled with magic in a land filled with mad scientists and death and choices. I'm excited to get back in this series. I really want to read all of them. There's another one coming out this year. I think it's the 9th or 10th one. They're all relatively short. I believe they're all less than 200 pages long. And I'm trying to really be in my short books era this year. You know, something concise, something hard-hitting. I love that kind of stuff. So next I'm going to try my hand at cozy fantasy. It might be romantasy. I'm not sure. It's Half a Soul by Olivia Atwater. I don't know much about this. I just know that it's Regency England, and she literally has half a soul. That's all I know about this. And you know what? That's kind of all I want to know about this. So next is The Leavers by Lisa Coe. This comes back to me saying I want to read some more books that either were award nominated, made long list. This was a National Book Award finalist. Came out in 2017. And this is a story about Polly, who is Deming Guo's mother, an undocumented Chinese immigrant who goes to her job at a nail salon and never comes home, and no one can find any trace of her. And so it's told from the perspective of Daniel as he grows into a directionless young man, and Polly, who gives us one of fiction's most singular mothers. Loving and selfish and determined and frightened, Polly is forced to make one heart-wrenching choice after another. Alrighty, back to, I don't know if this is truly horror or if it's just like horror adjacent, but it's A Certain Hunger by Chelsea Summers. This one follows a food critic, Dorothy Daniels. She loves what she does. She's discerning, meticulous, and very, very smart. Dorothy's clear mastery of the culinary arts makes it likely that she could, on any given night, whip up a more inspired dish than any of the chefs she writes about. Dorothy loves sex as much as she loves food, and when she has struggled to find a long-term partner that can keep up with her, she makes the best of her single life, frequently traveling from Manhattan to Italy for a taste of both. But there is something within Dorothy that's different from everyone else, and having suppressed it long enough, she starts to embrace what makes Dorothy uniquely, terrifyingly herself. It says, recounting her life from a seemingly idyllic farm-to-table childhood, the heights of her career to the moment she plunges an ice pick into a man's neck on Fire Island. Okay, so maybe it is horror. Dorothy Daniels shows us what happens when a woman finally embraces her superiority. It says, a satire of early foodieism, a critique on how gender is defined, in a showcase of virtuoso storytelling. It says, Chelsea Summers' A Certain Hunger introduces us to the food world's most charming psychopath, an exciting new voice in fiction. Okay. Also, another short book, 256 pages. We love to see it. We love to see it. Okay, I also don't know if I would call this a romance. I just know it's going to be emotionally intense and probably hurt my feelings in the way that only Kennedy Ryan can, and that is The Kingmaker. This one came out in 2019. It says, raised to rule, bred to lead, and weaned on a diet of ruthless ambition. In a world of have and have-nots, my family has it all, and I want nothing to do with it. My path takes me far from home and paints me as the black sheep. At odds with my father, I'm determined to build my own empire. I have rules, but Lennox Hunter is the exception to every one of them. From the moment we meet, something sparks between us, but my family stole from hers, and my father is the man she hates most. I lied to have her, and I'll do anything to keep her. Though she tries to hate me too, the inexplorable pull between us will not be defined, and neither will I. I don't know what to tell you about that. That sounds like a dramatic chaos. I read Before I Let Go by Kennedy Ryan earlier this year, and it did nothing but hurt my feelings. The next book in that comes out, I think in February. It's called This Could Be Us. That will also undoubtedly hurt my fucking feelings, because that's what Kennedy Ryan does best. I'm excited to dive in. She's one of those authors that for the longest time I didn't read her stuff. Not because I didn't think it was for me, but because I just knew it was going to be probably an emotional undertaking. And sometimes that's not what I want. So I am excited to be hurt yet again by Miss Kennedy Ryan. And you know what? I might pair these two books together because I think I'm going to need a palate cleanser after that and for something cozy to put my heart back together. And I think that book is going to be Against the Current by Olivia Matthews. This is a cozy mystery where Lindsay Murray is opening Spice Isle Bakery with her family, and it's everything she ever wanted. It's a West Indian bakery, and it's her way to give back to the community she loves, stay connected to her Grenadian roots, and work side by side with her family. The only thing getting a rise out of Lindsay is Claudio Fabrizi, a disgruntled fellow bakery owner who does not want any competition. On opening day, he comes in threatening to shut their bakery down. Fed up, Lindsay takes him to task in front of what seems to be the whole neighborhood. So when Claudio turns up dead a day later, murdered, Lindsay is unfortunately the prime suspect. To get the scent of suspicion off of her and her bakery, Lindsay has to prove she's innocent under the watchful eyes of her overprotective brother, anxious parents, and meddlesome extended family. What could go wrong? I can't wait to read this. And she actually has the third book in that series coming out in 2024, I believe, it just came out a couple days ago. It's called Coconut Drop Dead, and I think it follows Lindsay still. I'm pretty sure each of these, she's the main character, so. have been looking for a new cozy series to read, and one that is less emotional, maybe, than the Louise Penny series. I love the Armand Gamache series. I'll read each new book that comes out, but damn does those series hurt my feelings sometimes, like, I love those characters so much, and I love Three Pines, but sometimes you want a cozy mystery that is more funny than it is somber. And so I'm looking forward to diving into that Spice Isle Bakery mystery series and hoping that it does that for me. Okay, another romance that I have been putting off. This came out this year. I don't know why I haven't read this yet because everyone is raving about it. I don't think I've seen anyone give it less than 4 stars. It's Forget Me Not by Julie Soto. This book is I don't want to call it enemies to lovers because it's so rare that a contemporary romance, enemies to lovers, is truly enemies. It's normally like misunderstanding to lovers, or one of you is disgruntled, the other one's madly in love the whole time. So they're not really ever enemies. But it says Ama Torres has a lot of rules, but the most important one, absolutely no relationship. Ironic, given that her goal is to become the go-to wedding planner in Sacramento, but the one time she came close to her own happily ever after, it ended disastrously. So when she scores the celebrity wedding of the year, Ama is ready to make her dreams into reality. The catch? The tall, gorgeous, and incredibly terse florist who she maybe almost fell in love with and whose heart she most definitely broke. Elliot Bloom, yes, Bloom, knows that flowers need only 3 things: light, water, and attention, which makes him infinitely better than humans, especially certain bright workaholic exes who are obsessed with donuts and, unfortunately for him, utterly irresistible. If living without Alma is hard, working with her might be damn near impossible. But as the wedding takes on a life of its own, Alma and Elliot are about to discover some things can survive a complete catastrophe, and that love can be sweeter the second time around. I have been giving second chance romance a real try in the last year or so. It used to be one of those tropes where if I saw it on a book, like I would immediately be like, I'm not reading this, I'm writing it off. But so many people have done it so well recently that I've been willing to give it another shot, and I'm going to give that one another shot. So these last 3 are all, well, that one's speculative fiction and the other 2 are fantasy. Parable of the Sower by Octavia Butler. This feels like a classic that I just need to read. I would consider it a modern day classic. It came out in 1993, and I feel like something about this is going to feel, I think at the time would have been prophetic, and I think now is just reality. And let me read the synopsis so you understand what I mean. It says, when global climate change and economic crisis lead to the social chaos in the early 2020s, California becomes full of dangers from pervasive water shortage to masses of vagabonds who will do anything to live to see another day. 15-year-old Lauren Olamina lives inside a gated community with her preacher father, family, and neighbors, sheltered from the surrounding anarchy. In a society where any vulnerability is a risk, she suffers from hyperempathy, a debilitating sensitivity to others' emotions. Precocious and clear-eyed, Lauren must make her voice heard in order to protect her loved ones from the imminent disasters her small community stubbornly ignores. What begins as a fight for survival soon leads to something much more: the birth of a new faith and a startling vision of human destiny. And while I don't think it's going to be an exact match for how we're living today, I think it will have plenty of parallels to the pandemic, to the ever-growing distance between the have and the have-nots that we have going on right now, and have had for, generations. But I don't know, something about that synopsis, I was like, man, I feel like this is the time to read this. Okay, next on the list I have The Poppy War, which I have read before, but I really want to reread, because I read The Poppy War and The Dragon Republic maybe in 2020 or 2021, and for whatever reason, I did not immediately dive into The Burning God. And it's been so long since I read those first 2 that I now feel like I need to reread them in order to read The Burning God to have the fullest effect. So those are on my list. If you don't know, The Poppy War, I'll just synopsize that since I don't want to spoil, obviously, the next 2 books. It follows Rin, who lives in, I'm not sure if it's East. I don't know if they ever say that she's in China, but this series is it's definitely based off of Chinese history. She passes this incredibly hard exam to get into this prestigious academy where the kids who go to this academy, I say kids, I think they're all in their late teens. It's a military school where they're divided up into these different specialties. They all learn the same basics about defending themselves, but some of them have a knack for combat, some of them have a knack for communing with the gods. As they're going through and learning, there's a war brewing, and so they know, when I come out of school, I'm probably immediately going to go into combat, I'm immediately going to go into the field. And Rin, according to her classmates, just isn't supposed to be there. She's from a poor town. I believe she was an orphan and taken in by her aunt and uncle, who treat her just abysmally. And she gets out of there and she just becomes the anti-hero, which I fucking love. When a girl from a poor fucking town becomes the anti-hero, everyone's looking down on her. No one thinks she can do anything. She's a little peasant girl, and she's like, I don't fucking care. This is my life, and I'm going to choose my destiny. And that's very much her vibe the whole time. And lastly, this is more just an author than this book in particular, because I don't know that this book is the right one to start with, but it's Brandon Sanderson. How many times have I said in some of these videos that, like, I really want to dive into his stuff, but, like, I'm kind of nervous. I read, I think it was Warbreaker. That was a standalone that he wrote. Oh, I don't know when he wrote it. Let's see. Warbreaker. I read it in 2022. It came out in 2009. I loved that book. It was like almost 700 pages of just action and political intrigue and chaos. And I started there because I went to go look to see where to start on some of his other series. But he has this world called the Cosmere that most of his books fall into, and I just didn't know where to start. I do own the first book in the Stormlight Archive series, The Way of Kings. That book is 1,007 pages long. And I enjoy a long book from time to time, but I don't know if I can do that. So I don't know if that's where I'm going to start necessarily, but I do want to start in the Cosmere. I just downloaded Trust of the Emerald Sea because I heard such good things about that, and that's also a standalone. So maybe I'll start there while I'm figuring it out, and maybe I'll talk to some of my friends who I know who have read at least like 5 or 10 Brandon Sandersons of where they recommend I start. Because I don't know if I should start with Mistborn, which is a lot shorter. I know there's an original trilogy, but then there's 3 other books that follow after that trilogy ends. Are technically a part of it too. Then there's The Way of Kings, the Stormlight Archive. And the Stormlight Archive series, I think Way of Kings is the shortest book at 1,007 pages. With the exception of, like, I've seen what I think are meant to be novellas, but they're like 293 pages as a full book. That are like in between. Like Oathbringer is 1,243 pages. Brandon. Rhythms of War, 1,230 pages. Wind and Truth, which comes out this year, 1,232 pages. I don't know. I want to read his stuff, and his writing is so engaging, and he writes fantasy in such a way that, like, I felt it was approachable. I mean, I definitely needed note cards to keep up with who the characters were in the beginning when I was first reading Warbreaker, but that wasn't a deal breaker for me. I think partly, too, because I read the audio while simultaneously following along with a physical copy, which made it easy to, like, take notes without losing my place and feeling like I was disrupting where things were going. But I don't know. He's intimidating to me. So if you really enjoy Brandon Sanderson, please leave a comment down below where you think I should start. I really want to make this year like my fantasy year, I think. I'm not going to stop reading romance. I love it so much. But I really want to go back to having a diversified genre of reading every year. I feel like I read diversely author-wise, but not so much genre. And I want to get back to that where it's not 92% romance. Because as much as I love it, when you're reading the same tropes over and over again, it's hard to find books that wow you, either because you're not giving them the opportunity to, because it's, you know, the 8th brother's best friend trope that you've read in a row, or because sometimes it just isn't hitting. So I figure maybe I'll dive into some other genres this year to see if I can find some new favorites. Thank you so much for making it to the end of this video. If you wouldn't mind liking, subscribing, commenting, doing all those fun YouTube things, would love to hear your fantasy recommendations down in the comments, or if you're a Brandon Sanderson fan, please hook me up with a recommendation on where to start. With that being said, I will see you in my next video, which will be my 2024 most anticipated releases.